My dad only had one suit when I was growing up, and my brothers and I called it his funeral suit. In the mid 80s, my dad was an accountant with a big firm in Toronto, and during that period of his life, a suit and tie was what everybody had to wear. It was the dress code. But like a lot of people, my dad was not all that fond of dressing that way. So when he started working for himself, when I was about 5, he decided that he was done with suits and ties, and from now on, he was going to work in jeans and a hoodie. But he did still have one suit, the funeral suit. My dad is a self-employed chartered accountant, and because he's the only person that he works with, he has a lot of clients, and he knows almost all of them by name. So when one of them would pass away, or a family member of a client would pass away, of course my dad needed a suit to wear, so he had this one go-to suit. And my dad didn't wear this suit very often, mostly just for funerals. And as he would go to a funeral, he would kind of fold up that little program that you get at funerals and stick it in his breast pocket. And over time, he built up kind of an accumulation of those things in that breast pocket without really noticing. And that was fine until my cousin Ryan asked if he could borrow my dad's suit for the prom. My dad and my cousin have kind of a similar build, so, Ryan decided he'd ask Uncle Tom, that's my dad, if he could borrow his suit for the prom. Sure, Ryan, no problem. Here's my only suit. And it was at that time that we realized that having a breast pocket jammed full of funeral programs is actually sort of weird and creepy, especially maybe if you're a high school student who just wants to go to a prom. Now, as a pastor, I attend my fair share of funerals as well, so I guess if you ever wanted to borrow my purse, which, by the way, I would totally not let you do, but if you ever wanted to borrow my purse, you'd probably find a lot of those folded funeral bulletins in there, along with lots of other random stuff that builds up over time. Now, often when I attend a funeral, they're for people that I don't know very well, and sometimes they're even for people that I've never met, probably because they're connected with somebody that I do know. They're connected in a special way, maybe to one of you, to a member of our congregation. And when I attend a funeral for someone either that I've never met or that I don't know very well, I often have this sense as I'm hearing the tributes and these things that their friends and family members are saying about them, I often have this sense that I am meeting that person for the first time at their funeral. Now, if you've been to different kinds of funerals, then you know that attending a funeral for someone that you've never met or someone you didn't know very well, maybe as a support, for a friend or a family member, attending that kind of funeral is a very different experience than attending a funeral of someone that you really cared about, that you knew and that you loved. And attending so many funerals, maybe especially ones for people that I didn't know very well, and listening to that person's family and friends come up and talk about who they were and what mattered to them and the memories that they're taking with them, it's made me think a lot about this idea of legacy. What do I hope that people will say about me at my funeral? What do I want my children and my friends and the people who knew me well to remember about me? In other words, what is the measure of a well-lived life? If you've ever asked yourself that question, or if you've been wondering about that, then you're in luck, because this summer at Highview, we are going to be asking ourselves exactly that. What is the measure of a life well lived? And we're going to be delving into the book of Proverbs in order to do that and seeing if Proverbs can shed some light on that for us. What does it mean to live well with God? And what does it mean to live well with others also? Proverbs is part of an ancient Near Eastern genre called wisdom literature, which includes Job, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, and Song of Solomon. We can also find writings that are quite similar to what we find in Proverbs from other ancient Near Eastern sources, including ancient Egyptian writing as well. Now, Proverbs is a really interesting book, and I think at first read, it might kind of seem like Proverbs doesn't have all that much to do with God. It seems more like this collection of common sense sayings, about what life in the world is really like. And yet, as with any book of the Bible, or even any really good book you might pick up and read, there is a lot more going on in Proverbs than first meets the eye. Today we're going to talk about Proverbs 1, and Proverbs 1 begins like this. Proverbs 1, beginning at chapter 1 and going to verse 7. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, and knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For the understandings of proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The first verses in Proverbs are what's known as the superscription, or the introduction. If you've ever had to write an abstract for a paper where you write the whole paper and then you have to kind of create this condensed summary of what you said and the methodology that you used, what conclusions you came to, you write the paper and then you summarize very briefly what you said, that's what is going on at the beginning of Proverbs 1. That's basically what's happening here in the superscription. The author, who's identifying himself as King Solomon, is explaining what he wrote and why he wrote it. Later we'll find out that Proverbs contains the sayings of some other leaders as well, including a person named Gur and someone else called King Lemuel. And it seems likely that there was also the hand of at least one other editor involved in the process as well. Scholars think that the superscription in Proverbs 1 was written by that editor, and he's working with this whole book in its final form, and so he's in a good place to tell us what's in there and how we should read it. Proverbs is about wisdom, as it says there very plainly. It's about learning to live well with God and with others. And this word wisdom comes up over and over again, kind of throughout the entire book. Wisdom. What is wisdom? What does that mean? Well, when we think about wisdom, we might think about, someone who knows a lot of things, someone who's really knowledgeable or smart, but that's not exactly what Proverbs is talking about or what Proverbs means by wisdom. Wisdom, as Proverbs understands it, isn't about head knowledge so much as it's about learning the practical skill or learning the trade of how to live well with God and with others from a wise teacher who already knows how to do it. almost like an apprenticeship, that hands-on sort of learning. I am more of an academic sort of person than a hands-on sort of person. And I wanted to explore this idea of apprenticeship, but I knew that I would need some help. So I reached out to our friend and director of Highview, Mark Bramer. And if you are a regular member of our congregation, then he needs no introduction. But if you don't know, Mark has enjoyed a long career in the skilled trades as a cabinet maker, and also a long time teaching woodworking and cabinet making at Conestoga College. So this week I called Mark up on the phone, and he was willing to chat with me a little bit about apprenticeship in Canada and what that's like. And here's what I found out. So apprenticeship as a way of learning a trade was something that actually began in Europe and made its way over here to Canada. And most apprenticeships in the skilled trades here in Canada are about 2 to 4 years long, depending on the trade that you want to learn. Once you're accepted into an apprenticeship program, you begin like the hands-on learning of the trade right from day one. As an apprentice, you work alongside of somebody who's called a journey person, someone who's already completed their own apprenticeship and their own training, and they begin to teach you. And they teach you not just about the skills that you'll need for your trade, but they're also like physically showing you how to do those skills at the same time. How to measure and cut wood, or how to work with the machinery that you'll be using, or whatever your trade happens to be. There is some theoretical learning that goes into apprenticeship as well. You spend a little bit of time in school kind of intermittently over the process, but most of your learning experience is spent on the ground, so to speak, learning and getting paid for what you learn as well. And as a person who has spent a long time in school, I can tell you that if you can get paid for what you're learning, then that is a pretty good deal. Proverbs 1 verse 4 tells us that the intended audience of the book, who is this book written for? And in Proverbs 1 verse 4, we learn that Proverbs is for giving prudence to the simple and knowledge and discretion to the young. Now, the word simple here might be a little bit misleading. The word simple, as the author of Proverbs is using it, is not meant to be an insult as we might hear it used today or might have heard it used in the past. Throughout Proverbs, we are introduced to different sorts of people. The simple, the fool, the mocker, the wicked person. And the simple person, as Proverbs is describing it here, is in a much better place than any of these other categories of people. To be simple simply means to be naive, as in young, or maybe just inexperienced. A simple person is someone who doesn't know something yet, but wants to know, is willing to learn, is motivated to find out about the things they don't yet know. When a student is seeking an apprenticeship, which will eventually lead to that person's own certification, it's not just a matter of finding any old person who's willing to train you, but you also need to find the right kind of teacher. You need to be discerning in who you're going to invite into your life to teach you in this way. In order for it to be a real apprenticeship here in Canada, to be qualified to train apprentices, a journey person needs to have already gone through and completed that entire process himself or herself. In other words, you need to know what you're talking about if you're going to teach others how to do it. And I think there are a lot of similarities between how to become a skilled trades person, how to become a journeyman, how to learn a skilled trade, and how we become competent in living well with God and living well with others. The book of Proverbs calls this skill wisdom. And in the Christian church, we call it discipleship. And like in a skilled trade, wisdom, living well, is best learned by watching, listening, and doing alongside a person who's already learned it themselves and has already submitted themselves to that training that they're passing on to you. Whenever we learn anything, we start with the basics, right? We start with those foundational skills, that foundational knowledge, and things become increasingly more complex as we move forward. One thing builds on another thing, on another thing. You can't learn how to read and how to write unless you know the letters of the alphabet first and what sounds they all make. You can't learn to be a carpenter or a woodworker if you don't know the names of the different kinds of tools that you'll be working with and what jobs they each do. Likewise, there are foundational skills to living well that we need to learn before we're ready to move on to anything else. Old Testament scholar Bruce Waltke says that what the alphabet is to reading, fear of the Lord is to wisdom. Proverbs 1 verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you want to become a journey person in wisdom, fear of the Lord is the place to start. Wisdom of the kind we are talking about in Proverbs is, again, not just a head knowledge, not just an intellectual sort of knowing, but a relational sort of knowing, a relational knowing and awe of God that flows over into all the other parts of our lives as well. I think this quote from C.S. Lewis sums up well the kind of foundational knowledge we're talking about here in terms of fear of the Lord. C.S. Lewis says this: I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Now, Lewis, if you are unfamiliar with him, he was a professor of English literature at several prestigious universities throughout the 20th century and went on to become a prolific writer about many things, but especially in the area of faith. But Lewis actually started out as an atheist who eventually became convinced that Christianity was true and that Christianity's God was the real God. And I like this image he uses here about how the sun is the way by which we see everything else. And I think in a similar way, the fear of the Lord, when we start with that building block of a proper relationship with God, that is the starting point, the foundation for really growing in wisdom. From a New Testament perspective, the author of Hebrews 11, verse 6 says this: without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Like an apprentice learning a skilled trade, we learn to live well best when we learn it from others who already know how to do it. But like learning a skilled trade, we must be careful to choose a qualified teacher. In our conversation on the phone about the trades, Mark told me that a lot of the success, a lot of what makes a good apprenticeship is the journey person, the mentor, the person who's already learned these things. The attitude that the teacher brings into the relationship is key to how much the apprentice will learn. Ideally, a skilled journey person wants their apprentice to learn, wants them to gain new skills. Likewise, when you or I are looking for someone to mentor us or someone to help us walk well with God and walk well with others, we need to make sure that that person knows God themselves and that they're eager to pass on what they know of God in a practical way to others. The book of Proverbs as a whole is ultimately about helping the simple or the naive person grow towards maturity. And in the life of faith, what maturity means is that we are delving ever deeper into right relationship with God and right relationship with one another. And the hands-on, watch, listen, learn, do sort of approach is the best kind of learning for growing in this kind of wisdom, for becoming mature believers, for learning to live well with God and well with others. You know, what's really great about being an apprentice, and Mark stressed this a couple of times with me, here in Ontario, when you're an apprentice, you are able to start making money, like reaping the benefits of the training you're receiving right away, right from day one. And, you know, as I was thinking about it, I think we could maybe say the same thing for wisdom. When we start learning how to make good decisions, when we start reorienting our relationships with God and with others, it will be difficult. Certainly, all learning is difficult and there will be a cost, absolutely. But there are also some benefits, and we get to experience and live into those benefits right away without having to wait at all. Couple of benefits that you get to reap right away as you embark on this journey of following Jesus, learning to live well with God. One benefit is prayer. You have instant access to God right from day one. You don't have to wait. Another benefit is forgiveness. Once you ask Jesus to be the leader of your life, you are allowed to participate in that. You get to receive forgiveness and live forgiven right from day one, before you've learned anything, before you know some of those more advanced skills. Another benefit you get to reap right away is community. When you follow Jesus, you get to become enfolded in this beautiful, messy community called the church. And again, you don't have to wait to get your life together before participating in that. Another local church here in KW has a motto that says "No perfect people allowed," and that's not our motto at Highview, but we hold to that too. No perfect people allowed. We're all in this growing process together. Now, discipleship has a cost. Of course, following God has a cost. So I don't want to downplay that or make it sound like once you follow Jesus, your life is going to be all rosy. But I truly believe that this is the best way to live. Proverbs quite often speaks in the voice of an older person instructing a younger person in the ways of wisdom. Eric Fisher is going to talk a little bit about that next week as he brings the message to us. So my question to you as we wrap up for this morning is this: who are you learning from? And who are you teaching? Who are you learning from when it comes to living well with God, when it comes to being in right relationship with God and with others? No matter how long you've been following Jesus, how long you've been on this path, we all have something we could learn, and there's always someone we could learn from. Over these next 2 years at Highview Community Church, we have committed to learning together about reaching out more effectively to God through prayer, and reaching out more effectively to our neighbors through evangelism, and also reaching out more effectively to one another in building a stronger sense of community, especially across generations. We want to become a community of people for whom prayer is almost a second language, who enjoy deep intimacy with God and communicate with God regularly and naturally about the needs of the world, the needs of others in our lives, and about the state of our own hearts. We also want to become a community of people who love God so much, that this overrides our fear of what other people think of us when it comes to sharing our faith, when it comes to talking about Jesus with people who might not know him. Now, I'm not there yet. I'm not. But I want to get there. And some of you have lots of things that you could teach me. And I'm excited to be learning together with you. On this journey of learning to walk well with God and others, who are you learning from? And who are you teaching? I think people tend to feel intimidated by one or both of these things, by the learning or the teaching. If you're a younger person, or not younger maybe, but just someone who's just starting out on your faith journey, it can be hard to approach a more experienced Christian and say to them, hey, can we get coffee? Or maybe more realistically today, like, hey, can we chat on the phone? Can we arrange like a Zoom chat or something sometime? We might be a little bit afraid that they won't want to, or that it will be awkward. And in the same way, even if we have been walking in the way of Jesus for a long time, sometimes we might get intimidated by the teaching part. We might feel like we don't really have anything to offer anyone else, or, no one else would really want to learn from us. I'm a head person. I'm a person who can get really lost in my own head, and I can get a little bit psyched out by that sometimes. Well, who would want to learn from me? What do I really have to teach someone else? And this is where I think the apprenticeship hands-on metaphor becomes really helpful to me and really clarifying. Like, see, watch, do, and learn. That makes sense to me. That's how it is with my children. We made mac and cheese together, the boys and I, the other night, and the boys wanted to help, so they did. And they stood beside me at the stove, and they followed my instructions. And as they became more comfortable doing the jobs that I gave them, I would start letting them do more things on their own. And they're getting better at cooking. I'm watching those improvements as we go. Watch, listen, do, learn. If you don't have anyone in your life that you're learning from right now, in your Christian discipleship especially, find someone. And I think actually summer is a good time for that. Summer's a good time to connect with someone in this way. People tend to be a little bit more laid back and maybe have a little bit more time on their hands. And this summer, nobody's going anywhere, really. So maybe this summer is extra good for that. I don't know. And if you don't have someone that you're teaching, someone where you can model what you've learned by letting them watch you do it, letting them watch you make mistakes, find that person too. Maybe it's a younger family member, like a niece or a nephew, or your own child. Maybe it's a friend, and you're going to do that together. But find the person you're teaching as well. you might be surprised how much you have to share with someone else and how much you have to learn as well. Let's pray. Gracious God, thank you that you did not ask us to live this life following you alone, but that you have provided wise teachers along the way, and you've provided this beautiful, messy, broken community called the church, where we can learn together. For all who are tuning in from home, I ask that you would help all of us to get connected. Help us to find that person we're teaching and to. And thank you that we have the Holy Spirit as our ultimate teacher, leading and guiding us in the ways of Jesus together. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for joining us at Highview Online. I hope that you'll tune back in next week. Our friend Eric Fisher will be bringing the message, so we'll look forward to hearing Eric next week. Take care. See you soon.